Welcome everyone to the EED webinar on January 29th. This is webinar number 2, False Narratives and Emotional Tyranny. And thank you for joining us live and for joining us to listen to the recording of this webinar. I created here a bit of a clickbaity title. I don't know if it was clickbaity enough, but I wanted it to be provocative. So for those of you joining here live, so what brought you here? What was it about, say, this title or the description that piqued your interest and curiosity around false narratives and emotional tyranny?
Well, it was really clickbaity for me. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Because, it's just something that's like here everywhere in every conversation. I'm often wondering, okay, is the person really authentic here, or do they have to tell me that? Or when I want to tell something, okay, is that really something real, or am I just making something up? And where am I tyrannizing myself and others?
Right. Excellent. Yeah, that's definitely one of the points I want to work through. All right, and it does relate to why did EED get developed in the first place? And it is to counter false narratives. It is to neutralize any kind of emotional tyranny we hold over ourselves or another. And that means emotional manipulation and power, right? Power and control over others, which can become tyrannical if it gets extreme, okay? And traumatizing. Anyone else with comments here or even questions?
But it's also it's not only towards others; it's also towards themselves. People, yeah, they
exactly.
keep themselves under umbrella of some false narrative, and then they are prisoners there in the emotions they induce in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the question is how and why is that happening? Mm-hmm. And then if it is happening, how do we counteract it and release ourselves from being prisoners? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's, well, I'll say ultimately it is a prison of our own creation, but many times we're not aware of that prison.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're not aware of it. We're not aware of what we're feeding, which is actually holding us in a prison, or a prison of belief, let's say.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else there?
For me, the content of the webinar was hard to grasp just by reading the title.
Yeah.
But I like the picture a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the picture telling you? Because I've got a few levels here that I'm trying to get across here.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it. I don't know. It's drawing me in the screen, and then we are in this kind of magical, creepy cave, which is like really. I mean, anything could be there.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you even managed to create this picture in Photoshop, or whatever you're using for that. It's just like it fits the title. I feel a lot, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go to this movie, you know?
Okay.
Like,
all right. Well, this is exactly another level where I'm pointing. Okay, so all narratives are basically constructing a movie. We're living in a movie, so to speak. We're creating our own movie, right? This can relate to hero's journey. Who's the hero of the movie, right? But it also is pointing to what are we seeing around us in media, all right? What are we being fed, all right? Whether it's false or true, it's still a narrative, and narratives with emotion. When you have an emotional narrative, it is programming, okay? And we're getting a lot from media, TV, and it's in a way programming us or hypnotizing us, but we are also hypnotizing ourselves through every conversation. Every conversation is reinforcing a narrative. So this is two main things I want to do here is first question, what is a narrative? And what does a narrative consist of? How do we recognize what a narrative is? And how is a narrative different from truth?
Mm-hmm.
How is it different from story? How is it different from fact? Okay. These things need to be distinguished. And the other thing is, what is the role of emotion? There is a function of emotion, all right? And we're going to get into that. When you combine emotion and narrative together, you're going to get programming.
Okay.
Okay. And when we talk about the coaching industry, the change agents out there, transformation, self-help, all of that, all right? Too many people, too many systems are engaging at the narrative level. They're not engaging at the level of the person. Now, in past webinars, we've looked at story, game, dream, source. So this is focusing on story, that first level. And why is it that EED does not engage with that, all right? Why do we get underneath story, underneath game level in order to start the real transformational work at dream and source level? Okay, so I've spent many webinars talking about dream and source, not enough talking about story, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I put this in. Most people are attempting to enact or do transformation at the story level or the game level, and they're not even aware that there are these other levels underneath. They might not even know they're engaged in the story and the game. Okay, but if you're attempting to do transformation on the narrative level, it's only going to create more opposition and resistance, and it's just only going to reinforce the original narrative.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to understand what is a narrative and how does the emotion hold the narrative in place in order to break through, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If we're only working on the narrative level, if we're working with emotions that are going to support the narrative, then all we're doing is we're risking false empowerment, which does not make a sustainable transformation. It might create a temporary fix, but that original state is going to snap back into place, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Engaging too much with the narrative just risks self-deception. And that can create false transformation, which runs the risk of indoctrination and bad programming. Basically, bad programming, disempowered programming, or unwanted programming, or undesirable programming, okay? All of that said, this is why we're saying resilience first. Get a foundation of resilience, because resilience goes beyond narrative, all right? When we get into source, it has nothing to do with narrative or point of view. It doesn't have anything to do with emotions. This is where we can get into our core being, core self, and engage the higher mind, the higher wisdom, not the mind that has been indoctrinated with beliefs, okay, and consensus and learned knowledge and learned behaviors. Source is not dictated by all of that stuff. Are you guys following what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so that's my little spiel. When we are under emotional tyranny, we are being held prisoner, and mostly we are causing that emotional tyranny ourselves and projecting it on others, all right? That can be a hard thing to swallow for some people, all right? Oh, but no, I'm here to help people, right? But again, if you're gonna do your work at the narrative level and you can't detect a narrative, or you can't detect that there's a game of opposition here and we're trying to look for consensus, you're not going to transform anything. You're just going to reinforce the programming that's already been set in place. Okay? You can't dismantle it. So there you have it. Any comments or questions there? And I'll give you a quick summary of what we're discovering. Okay. So first of all, we're going to get an overview of what constitutes a narrative or a story and why they are important. I'm not saying narrative is bad, but it can be misused or misunderstood, okay? And then we can understand, when does a narrative become misleading or even toxic, okay? Because it can create cognitive dissonance. This is the narrative I want, but this is the narrative that I'm actually being run by. And they can be two different things, okay?
Yeah.
I can say I want to be a success, but underneath I've got this embedded narrative saying I'm a failure and I don't deserve it. And if that's not addressed, right? If I just keep saying, oh, but you are a good person. Oh, but you are successful. Oh, but you have all the resources to create success and all that stuff. No, it's not, nothing is going to change. That's actually creating more of a divide within myself, and it's creating more polarization. Do you understand? Okay, so we're going to show you, how do you get beyond that narrative? How do you break through? We're going to look at the function of emotions, how they're used for programming and deprogramming. So there's a double function with emotions, okay? It can either program something or it can release something. So then we can look at, okay, so how, we're going to work with emotions, but how do we handle them responsibly? And I'm not saying we need to be afraid of emotions. What I'm saying is know what you're working with and know what you're after. Are you programming or deprogramming? It can be that simple. So that will determine how are you handling emotions in the conversation or in the coaching, etc. Okay. We're going to look at how you detect manipulation through emotional narrative. All right. And if we can detect when narrative is getting construed with emotions, which is instilling fear and it's trying to exert power or control over you, then you can start to disengage and immunize yourself from any undesirable programming. Because if you buy into the narrative and get caught up in the whole emotional storm, you're going to be also reinforcing the programming that goes with it. Does this make sense? Okay. Which means sometimes clients and people will get emotional. So what are you engaging with? Okay. And are you just aiding and abetting them to reinforce a programming they don't even want in the first place? Does this make sense? All right. And then finally, we're going to look at simple ways to reconnect to a simple baseline of autonomous truth. And what do I mean by autonomous truth? That is truth within, not truth that I've taken on from the outside. All right. I need to get a nose and eyes and ears for what is truth. All right. Or what is the truth I choose according to who I am at my core, as opposed to who I think I am, or who I think I'm supposed to be, or who I'm told I am. Do you understand? Okay. Now, there's going to be the next webinar, which will be a part 2, and it's going to focus more on, well, this webinar is focused on let's deconstruct the narrative, let's deprogram. The next webinar is going to focus on let's reconstruct and reprogram. So let's reconstruct the narrative and reprogram ourselves according to a autonomous source and resilience. Okay. How are you guys doing with this?
Okay.
I hear a little bit of background noise. So if you're typing, maybe just mute yourself and then jump in at any time by unmuting. Okay. All right. Now, this is, I know you guys here, you've all taken the EED courses, but people listening to the recording may have not. So I'm going to run through this really quickly. What is EED? It's a universal model. And it's pinpointing the most fundamental level that drives human dynamics, which means everything is occurring in relationship. So we are working with everything in relationship to each other. All right. I have a relationship to myself. I have a relationship to you. I have a relationship to the world. I have a relationship to time. And if there is a coach or a leader or someone working with me, I'm also having a relationship to them. Okay. So the way we're working, it's fractal based and it's holistic, meaning everything and anything that's happening, it's happening in patterns. And those patterns and cycles are happening over and over and over again. And it's those patterns and cycles that are determining what's driving my behavior. That is the dynamic, or these patterns and cycles. And a fractal works from the smallest level to the largest level. It's the same pattern over and over again. So we're working with what are the actions and the behaviors and the energy of the person to reveal those patterns. And then we're working with the smallest behaviors and smallest energies and smallest actions in order to reset the pattern, because that will then have a ripple effect into their bigger patterns, their bigger mindset, and their bigger behaviors. Start at the small, it will have a ripple effect to the big stuff. This is why then we don't have to do dramatic transformations. We don't have to do big leaps of action and logic. We can work on the small scale, knowing that over time, when those small things are mastered, naturally the big choices and big changes will come. And it will come from a person's autonomy and freedom of choice, because they're connected to their well-being and they're connected to source. So rather than focusing on transformation, we're focusing on resilience. Build the resilience first in a person so they have a foundation, and that they're connected to their own well-being and autonomy. And that way, then they'll know exactly what they want to shift into. If there is no foundation of resilience, then we may be doing false transformation, because they're just doing what they think they're supposed to do, which still may not feel natural for them. So by establishing resilience first and restoring well-being and autonomy, what we're doing is we're liberating the higher mind, a connection to source or essence. This is a more permanent and timeless aspect of one's self. This inner knowing, this connection to nature, where when we can have resilience and liberate our higher mind, have a connection to essence, then nothing is taboo, because I'm permanent, I'm timeless. And so therefore everything is available as creative potential. And that's what's going to give me agility in the way I act and behave. So it's not a process of transformation. It's more a process of transmutation, meaning nothing is added or deleted. We're just taking what's already there, opening the higher mind, connecting that back with the ego or the identity, so they're working congruently with each other. And then that is giving the ego or the identity creativity, resilience, and autonomy. So it's more of an alchemical process. Now, any questions here? This is applicable to coaching, leadership, mediation, facilitation, healing, or anything. The point is we're not adding or taking anything away. We're just giving the purest, highest expression of an individual from their source. Questions, comments there? How was that as a spiel?
It was good.
Okay.
I like the higher mind and connecting back to the higher mind, getting a more truthful expression of who the person is beyond ego. Yeah, you pinpointed it very well right now.
Yeah, ego is a construct. It's a necessary construct in order for us to act and create, okay? But what is it being constructed from? And if it's coming from outside, it's a false construct. If it's coming from within, a pure connection to our essence, then it's more truthful. That's basically it, okay?
Okay.
All right, so a narrative is the arena of our creation. A narrative belongs to the ego and the identity, okay? So it is a necessary thing. We're not saying narratives are bad. Now, here's how I'm going to define it, and you guys feel free to debate me. You feel free to disagree. But let's look at what a narrative is. It's a construct of facts, events, and history. And it's meant, you string them together in order to build a point of view, and that point of view will determine action. Okay? What this does is it reinforces a belief, which creates a perception, which creates a mindset, and that all creates a self-fulfilling reality. So this is where I'm saying narrative is programming. It's a select programming to move. It gives me a track to move forward and justify every action according to my programming. Is that making sense? Any questions there? Okay. So it is a vehicle, or it is the parameters, okay, set parameters for the identity to function. Okay, we all have an identity. It's meant to function in this world. And once that identity has some parameters within which to function, meaning a belief system, that's going to affect what it creates and how it creates. And it's also going to affect the identity's own sense of validation and power. Okay? So a narrative is either going to increase or decrease the identity's sense of validation. It's going to increase or decrease its sense of power or control. What I mean by validation, and I'll be quick on this because I've said it in past webinars, but validation asks the question, do I exist? And it's looking outside of itself for proof. Do I exist? Acknowledge me. Tell me I belong. Tell me I'm a good person. Okay? And then power and control is, how do I make sure that I exist? Okay? It's looking for security. It's looking for control to make sure that once it can validate its existence, it needs to sustain its existence. Okay? Both can be driven by fear.
How do you picture that for yourself?
What do you mean picture?
Like, yeah, maybe I'm a visual thinker, but I'm if I try to grasp this purely intellectual, I'm having difficulties because of the complexity of the words, of the terminology.
Okay.
And I like to get a picture. Like the ego is, I don't know, can we make a metaphor maybe? It is like, I like the game metaphor of a Super Mario game, for example.
Okay, yeah, great. So think of that. Like my identity or my personality allows me to function in this world. It is like if I'm going to be in a video game, I need a character. Okay.
Yeah, we can represent this.
Okay.
Yeah. So the video game itself is belief system or the narrative.
It's
and
the world.
Character is my identity. And then it will just run through it and there are choices and these things. Okay, yeah.
That's right. Okay. Because otherwise, if you're only at source, you're infinite awareness. You have no body, you have no mind construct, nothing. You are infinite potential. That needs to condense down into, you know, a body and a vehicle for me to play in this world. Okay. So that's what's giving me an identity or personality. Now, the mistake people make is they think that that's fixed and rigid. Whereas you change your clothes every day, you can change your identity every day. But when you change your identity, you're also changing your preferences, your perceptions, your beliefs, your whole mindset changes along with the identity, okay? And we're constructing ourselves according to an identity, which comes part and parcel with belief systems, okay, and perceptions, which is going to influence how we feel and how we act and behave, okay? All right. Is that okay for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was enough to get
So most of the mistake we make a lot in life is we think we are our story. We think we are our identity. And we need to create a separation of that in order to create more flexibility and adaptability. All right. And that's what's going to give us the agility in life, is if I can separate myself from my identity and my story and realize there is actually a more fluid portion of myself that has infinite potential and can become anything. Okay. If I'm too attached to my identity, then all I'm going to do is just keep proving my identity right. I'm just going to keep justifying that identity. And that's what I mean by self-fulfilling reality. Okay. So deconstructing a narrative involves reducing the story to simple observable facts. And these facts need to be separated from any emotional investment or bias or belief. Okay, I'll give you an example. Here's the fact. I woke up this morning. That's the fact. I woke up. Now, if I want to make that into a story or a narrative, I'm going to say, I woke up feeling miserable and anxious because I've got a job interview today and I don't know if I'm going to get the job. So I'm worried. Do you understand how that's now programming my day? Do you understand? Or I woke up with the sun shining, feeling inspired and impressed, and I'm going to get all this work done, and I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to make everyone happy. Same thing, but it's got bias, belief, perception, and emotion in there. Do you understand? But the simple fact is I just woke up. That's it. So does that make sense to you guys? Or why would that be important to underline and stress?
Because when we are not separating the story from the facts, then we will have difficult dealing with the emotions. Like we will, if we are entangled too much in the story, then we will feel that the emotions are unavoidable, and we will stop, we will not even question them.
Right.
But when we can reduce the story to the facts, then we will say, okay, the fact is I woke up. So where's the emotion coming from? Well, it's not coming from the fact, because it's just I woke up. So it's coming from something else, which is then the programming.
Right. So I'll give you an example here. Client comes and says, yeah, I woke up this morning feeling really depressed, and I've got this job interview today, and I need a coaching session to get motivated so that I can be, you know, on the right track and give a good interview. Mm-hmm. Okay. Coach immediately can typically jump into and say, you know, okay, so what's needed, what's required for this interview? They can get into story details, right? Or they can get into, oh, well, no, yeah, you don't want to be feeling bad, you know. So they're engaging with the narrative, they're engaging with the emotion, or they're engaging with the perception, or they might say, well, what value is being stepped on? Or what, you know, how does it feel to be so you know, ill-confident, depressed? Or, you know, well, what would it be like if, you know, you could just change your perspective and feel like, you know, everything is going to go great, you know, or, you know, you're a very courageous person, or all of that stuff is still on the narrative level. You understand? Here's the fact. You woke up this morning. Here's the fact. There's a job interview. Here's another fact. You're feeling depressed. Here's another fact. You're feeling low energy. Let's not string them all together. So a question could be, so how does it feel the moment you open your eyes? That's playing with the fact that you woke up. Okay, you feel depressed. What is going on in your body? And I am not relating it back to, you got a job interview coming up, we better do something about this, or why did you wake up depressed? And it's just the simple pure energy of, you're depressed. What's that like for you? Do you understand? Mm-hmm. We're isolating things. We're not collapsing it all together. Okay. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
You're pulling out the individual spark.
Yeah, just individual sparks, individual little facts. If I'm stringing them all together while I'm processing, I may be further programming what's already there. Just reprogramming, meaning like reinforcing the programming, or re-traumatizing. Client says, oh, I had a really bad day at work. Oh my God, what happened? But they're still engaging with the emotion of, this was a bad day. They're still engaging with the perception that it's a bad day. Do you understand? And then recounting the events and getting worked up all over again. So in order to deconstruct a narrative, we have to just take the story and make it into observable facts separate from emotion, bias, and belief. Is that making sense to you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first step we go when we're working with EED, which is going to get us down into dream level, okay, where we can have a more fluid experience.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to construct a narrative, okay, we're connecting convenient truths together and adding emotional investment so that we start programming a particular point of view, which is going to create a select reality. Does that sound like a bunch of gobbledygook, or what makes sense to you there?
What do you mean convenient truth? Convenient for whom? For the person who is actually putting together the narrative around the facts.
Exactly. What they're doing is they're connecting select dots to create a select truth. adding emotional investment, so it creates a select mindset, belief system, point of view, and that's going to determine and program them how they act and behave, which means it's going to select what they create, which means that's selecting the reality they're going to live in. Okay. So, I mean, the whole thing questions, well, what is truth? What's really true? All our narratives are basically just selecting and stringing together particular facts to create a point of view, which creates the mindset, creates the reality. That here is, I mean, what we're really saying here is what we seek, we set out to prove. Okay, we explore that in module 2 of EED quite extensively. So if we're constructing a narrative, we're constructing a roadmap to execute the programming that will make true whatever we want to make true. So really the question is, who is writing the story and why? And we'll not get an accurate answer to that unless we first separate the person from the story, separate them from their belief systems, and drop them into source level so they can get to know their infinite self from a level of all potential where everything can be true. And from there, they can determine who they want to be as opposed to who they think they should be. Does this make sense? When they come from resilience and autonomy, they can be anything and everything they want to be. If they're not connected to source, resilience and autonomy, they're going to construct themselves out of fear.
So I'm wondering if they say, I had a bad day, you don't have any facts, or do you have, what can you ask them?
Well, we'll get into that in a moment. You know, what can we ask and what can we do? If I say what made it bad, and I start getting a string of facts, all I'm going to get is an argument that justifies the day was bad. Okay. If I ask, so how does that affect you personally, the bad day? That might lead us more into, okay, it makes me feel small and insignificant. Well, how is that for you? To be small and insignificant. Well, that's not who I really am. Well, who are you? Well, I want to be more powerful. That's getting into a story. It's more of, let's move them into the acceptance. Okay, so then there are times when you are small and insignificant. What is that like for you? Are you hearing the difference?
Yeah.
Okay. The next diagram, you know this, the pyramid of story, game, dream, and source. If I keep getting the client to defend their story or argue it or tell it, so they're reinforcing it, because what they're doing is they're looking, it's just one point of view. It's a singular truth, one truth. I'm having a bad day because I feel small and insignificant and I don't want that. Do you understand? If I argue it or keep having them tell me that over and over and over again, it's going to get us nowhere. It's only one truth, right? One point of view. And so what they're doing is it's a feedback loop. They're feeding back to themselves. Do you see? I don't want this, but I keep being it. Do you understand? Yeah. Now, if I try to change that story, I'm creating opposition, and now I'm playing a game with them. Okay, because I have one sealed reality saying, oh, but you're a much better, bigger person. You are absolutely significant. Why should you be feeling this way? And it's my job to change your mindset. Okay, but they're going to keep reinforcing that. And the more I push on them, the more I try to break through, they're just going to reinforce their side, and then I'm going to reinforce my side. And that's creating a polarization. It's called truth in opposition. And they can even be doing truth in opposition in their own mind. That's what polarity is, bouncing back and forth between two conflicting realities. Am I small and insignificant? Am I all powerful? Do you understand?
Yeah.
What's missing here, what will keep it rigid? I mean, this goes back to the 8 stages of truthful relationship, which is first recognize what's going on and then accept what's going on.
Acceptance, yeah.
Acceptance says it is what it is. This story says I'm small and insignificant. So, all right, it is what it is. How is that? How am I still here being small and insignificant? I can get fascinated with that. All right, it starts to open my bubble where I'm no longer doing a feedback to myself, but I'm actually looking out at what's around me. Look at the world. Look at the other people. Here, everyone makes me feel small and insignificant. Here, if I'm accepting I'm small and insignificant, I can say, well, who are they? What are they doing? Not in relationship to me, in how it reinforces, but just what's really out there. And I let myself be affected by it. Okay, so this big guy, all powerful, makes me feel all small and insignificant. So fine, I accept temporarily. It is what it is. This guy's big, I'm small. What can I start to learn from that and be fascinated? And that gets us more in a truthful, fluid reality of truth, okay? And then I can start to break away from my story because I can say, well, actually, you know what? This guy has a lot of care and concern for me. And actually, the more I connect with that, as opposed to the threat, I'm actually feeling more reassured in myself. And I don't need to depend on this guy to validate me because I'm actually feeling the reassurance within myself, right? That's dropping me more into source, okay? I'm feeling, even if I am small and insignificant, I'm not dead. I'm alive. I'm full of vitality.
Mm-hmm.
There's where I'm going to get autonomy and resilience. And then this story doesn't have to apply. But if the story does come, I don't have to feel threatened by it. How are you guys doing with this?
Yeah.
Is this kind of making sense?
Yeah.
Right. So at source level, this is where we have unified truth. Everything can be true. But we don't live at that level. I mean, this is where we reconcile paradoxes and opposites. Here, opposites can complement each other, and here, opposites fight each other.
Fight each other.
Okay, or contradict each other. Here, hot and cold can exist because there's no such thing as hot or cold. It's all temperature at once. Here, hot and cold work together to create a range of temperature. Here, hot and cold exist where one has to be better or more than the other. And then I'm choosing a side. Okay. Any questions there? As it relates back to story, narrative, all of this, are you starting to see why if we keep engaging with narratives, all we're going to get is a lot of gameplay, but we're never going to get into a new reality? Do you understand?
Mm.
Okay.
I like how you pointed out that how we are feedbacking back our story to ourselves. It's like living in the narrative and all the time, looking for what we perceiving. What's again from there?
Yeah, well, no, actually, that's you brought a good point into my mind here.
Yeah.
Conflict is a way for each person to reinforce their own narrative.
Yeah, they're using it.
Okay, I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat, and the more I try to convince you how being a Republican is better, or the more I convince you that being a Democrat is better, I'm reinforcing my own belief in my story, and I'm causing you to actually reinforce your own story because we're both trying to conquer each other's bubble, right? And then that's just going to turn into you must submit or I must submit. Do you understand? That's creating the power game. Whereas here it's not, a status of one is better than the other, but actually the red and the blue, the Republican and the Democrat create a larger spectrum, a larger system of, and then ideas can actually be exchanged. And we can influence and learn from each other without protecting our own rigid story. So the key here to transformation is let go of the story. Let go of the need to hold on to an identity through the story. Do you understand? And in order to let go of an identity, we need to be connected to resilience, a deeper source. that's beyond identity, then that enables me to influence and be influenced. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So conflict is a way of just reinforcing each side of the argument. And it's accomplishing nothing except reinforcing more story.
Yeah, and it can even become more and more entangled.
Yes.
People build up each other's narrative,
yeah,
even when they're fighting it.
Yeah.
And then enemies can even become so entangled with each other that they depend on the other person to exist, so that their own existence is validated.
That's right. So, and
example would be like the Antifa and the right people.
Sure.
The Nazis, take it like this, because if one of the side wouldn't exist anymore, they would be like, okay, who am I now without fighting this other person?
If I'm operating on game level, then this is how I'm choosing my friends and enemies. Who is in agreement with my reality bubble? Whoever is in agreement is my friend and on my side. Whoever is not in agreement is my enemy. And therefore now I need to be a warrior and conquer them, or be a victim and run away. Do you understand? Yeah. Here, when I'm not so attached to a reality bubble, I'm actually then experiencing the world more as it is, because I'm not creating a convenient world for myself, but I'm actually an explorer. Does this make sense?
Makes sense. We're getting out of a more defensive stance into a more mindset of openness.
Yeah.
So, or it's like, it's not that rigid anymore, because we are not this feeling of being attacked or under pressure.
That's right.
So,
and so this is what helps start to reconcile diversity and unity. Mm-hmm. If I can have a more open bubble, I'm actually able to be the other side and realize how both sides work together and how they're actually trying to express the same thing from different angles. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if that creates more compassion and empathy and higher-minded understanding, therefore you can have your point of view and I can have mine, and I can see how they all contribute to something. And that starts creating more unity, where I can respect your side, you can respect my side, and know that we can be both. And today I'm choosing to be here, and today you're choosing to be there, but it doesn't threaten me. And we can be unified. We're all expressions, different expressions of the same thing. We experience that unity here when there is no more reality construct. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, I wasn't intending to spend so much time here, but I think we got enough here, yeah? We're already at the top of the hour, so hopefully you could stay. Okay, so then here's the question. What's truth? What's a lie? How do we know if a narrative is true or false? Okay, what if the narrative is false? Okay, I mean, what are your first answers to that? Based on what we just looked at, is this even a relevant question?
Not quite, because the narrative pertains to the person who,
a narrative is a select expression of source.
Yeah, exactly, of that person.
Yeah.
So it's only from outside of that person bubble, somebody else can qualify that narrative false.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's another way to look at it. It doesn't matter what we believe, we'll make it true. Okay. But there are deeper truths. Okay. And they come from source. Okay. Here's the difference between a truth and a lie. A lie has no foundation. A lie can't get below this red line. It's constructed from the red line upwards, which means it's constructed from emptiness. It's a narrative built on fear and emptiness. That means it can fall apart. It has no foundation. Truth comes from the whole source. It's an expression of the whole cloth, so to speak. It's a thread from the whole cloth. That's it. Can't fall apart. Because it is the foundation. So here, truth is undeniable, effortless, and resilience. if I'm telling a truth, if I'm living a truth, it's just undeniable, it's effortless, and it's resilience. It is whole unto itself, and source is its foundation. So it's coming from all infinite natural potential. It's an expression of that. It's a clean expression of it. All right? A lie takes energy to hold itself together, meaning if I'm lying to myself or I'm lying to you, it is a construct. It is incomplete because it never has all the pieces in place. Why? Because it's a fabrication, or it's an imitation of something with no real foundation. How's this hitting you guys? And this can be when you're hearing a narrative, when you're looking out into the media, or you're reading the history books, or you're watching an argument. Right? You might see false narratives at play. And then you're going to see moments of truth as well. How do you tell the difference, right? This is more what we're looking for. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, in a way, all narratives are a construct, we said earlier, right? So in a way, all narratives could be false, but also some narratives will also be, in a way, based on truth or come from a source of something. So I think we're wasting our time to say, well, what's really true? Okay. More so, what is true within myself, and how am I in relationship to a world? If I am in truthful relationship with things, well, then I'm going to make a truthful world, and I'm going to experience a truthful reality. And I don't have to waste time seeing who's a liar, who's deceiving me, who's this, who's that. Because that can develop into paranoia, and all that paranoia is just coming from fear and emptiness. I've disconnected from resilience. Okay, so whether truth becomes a lie or lie becomes a truth, because it's possible to hide a truth and cover it up with some lie, or it's possible to start with a lie and repeat it, this is propaganda, and repeat it enough and enough over and over and over again, it starts to seem like a truth, okay? Real truth, source truth, natural truth will eventually reset itself and assert itself, and the lie will fall apart. So what do? You challenge the truth. That's it. Whatever you're hearing, whatever you're seeing, be willing to question and challenge it. And if it holds water, it holds water. If it doesn't hold water, well, then I guess it wasn't a truth. Is this making sense? This is why in EED, we are willing to provoke the client. We are willing to counter the client, especially if they're bopping back and forth on a polarity game within themselves. Am I small and insignificant? Am I all powerful? Am I, blah, blah, blah. If we're willing to poke holes in their story and see what holds and doesn't hold, we're actually leading the client more towards an autonomous truth, just by being willing to challenge and question, as opposed to, I don't want to offend you, therefore I'm going to support your argument. How are you guys doing with this information?
It's kind of confusing, because isn't that creating opposition and then also feeding the narrative?
Depends how you do it. And what we're doing is, as facilitator, I'm here. I'm coming from a place of acceptance. I can accept you're having a bad day. How bad is it? As opposed to, oh my God, you're having a bad day. That's not how it's supposed to be. Let's make it better, because you said you want to make it a better day. Or I can be willing to even say, well, how do you know it's really that bad? What made it so bad? That might get them defending themselves, but then I'm saying, hey, look, you're defending yourself real strong. What kind of strong energy is that? Now I've just gotten them off the story and back into their own pure energy. If I'm only going to follow what the client tells me and really hang on their words, then I'm just following a story. And I may be encouraging them to keep programming themselves a certain way. Do you understand? If I'm willing to challenge their story or question what they're saying, it's not because I need to prove them wrong. It's more to have them awaken. Okay.
Make them aware. Yeah.
Make them aware. What are you doing to yourself here? How is it when you're doing that to yourself? Okay. I want to make a very clear distinction on that. Okay. But I do notice that a lot of people are unwilling to do that. Why? Because they're holding their client as fragile in the first place.
I find this expression, what are you doing to yourself, very, very interesting, because I was talking with Amy about this earlier and thinking about this a lot, because what you're doing to each other, what we are doing to each other, if we find that is it truth already? It is truth already, right? Because you can derive so many information from that. When you're sitting at a bar, people are next to you, and person A talks to person B who's sitting next to you, and they're like, and you understand what she's doing to her, and you understand how it relates to you. You couldn't get to that point with just the words that has been spoken, but when you understand how people act upon each other,
that's right.
It's so rich. It's so rich.
Right.
Really.
So this is my next point. Like, how can you determine truth? How do you navigate truth? One,
okay.
truth is based upon transparency, congruency, meaning what I'm thinking, feeling, acting, doing, all lines up. It is also consistent. It is also generous. And along with that, it is resilient, and it stands the test of time. It has longevity. Okay? Meaning, when you are standing in truth, there is nothing to protect or defend. You can be radiant. The truth will not crumble. I don't have to make shit up around it to make it more true. It's just there. There it is. It's actually quite effortless. Does this make sense? Okay.
It makes a lot of sense, especially when you think of people who are shit-sharing so much or just trying to talk the other person into the ground, you know?
Right. And we're going to get into that next. Like, what are the telltale signs that there's a deception going on? Okay. That there isn't a full truth here. Okay. But what we're doing with EED, once we're dropping them into a dream level or source, they're already beginning to act more congruent. They're more consistent. They're generous with themselves and with you. They're experiencing resilience, and they're feeling a permanence, a timelessness. That's longevity. And then they can be very transparent with themselves. Okay. And there's nothing that we need to praise or diminish. It's just there. Okay. And there's an acceptance of it. Also, when someone is coming from truth, or they're in a truthful stance, they're willing to be challenged and questioned. Ask me anything. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Great, I'll learn. But I don't need to defend what I think is true, and don't you dare challenge that, right? There already something doesn't hold water. If I've got to hold on to it and cling to it, there's something deceptive going on, whether I'm aware of it or not. Do you understand? Okay, so when I'm coming from a truthful place, great, challenge me, question me. It's why I say always, like, hey guys, it's okay if you say I'm wrong, because it's only going to make me dig around deeper to really find, well, then what is true? Okay, I'm not here to convince you. And truth is revealed through action and behavior. It is not through words. I can tell you all day long, day in, day out, I love you, I love you, I love you. But if I keep stepping on you, disrespecting you, not supporting you, not even, engaging with you in an intimate way, I mean, where's the love? Do you understand? You'll see and feel and experience that I love you. You don't need the words. Does that make sense? So you got to look beyond words and look at actions and behaviors to see what is the truth coming at me. Now, everybody tells the truth in the moment, and everybody also calculates deception on top of it. Okay, it takes a lot of discipline to be completely transparent. The problem is more, they might be disconnected from resilience and source and truth, and they're choosing to engage more with that empty deception in order to protect themselves. This is why resilience first. When we focus on resilience first, we're going to drop into a truth. And we're not listening to what they say, we're looking at what they do. Questions, comments there? Anything? No? Okay, so how do we construct a deception?
There's a question.
Yeah.
Regarding what we are doing to each other, it sounds like metaphorical speaking. Or there's some part of it, it sounds like doing can be an action. You're hitting me.
Yeah.
Behavior, you're behaving like this or like that, which is already closer to what we're doing to each other when we use it as a paraphrase. Like
Right.
you're acting like my brother, okay, or you're acting like a mother, you're mothering me or something like that, or you're patronizing me. Patronizing, as example, because patronizing is not a distinct behavior, it's not a distinct action. Still, it describes what someone's doing to someone.
Right. Okay. Now I want to add something in that truth and acceptance. Okay. So you're patronizing me, right? Yes, I am. That's an acceptance. Okay. No, I'm not patronizing me. Well, then what are you doing? Oh, I'm just taking care of you. Well, no, it feels like patronizing. Okay. Like we're going to work it out. But as soon as there's an acceptance of the behaviors and actions of each other, that's where we're going to start dropping into a level of truth between each other. That's how, when we're working with conflict, we drop into green from game. So and you know, we have two reactions to everything. My first impulse and then my calculated reaction. And then I'm going to act either according to first impulse, which is far more truthful and transparent, or I'm going to act from my calculated reaction, which is more mask and shield. Okay. So, and I'm saying that all of it can be true, but what's the source truth? All right. What's the more transparent truth that has congruency, consistency, and longevity to it? All right. I can attack you, I can patronize you, I can scold you, but really the truth below all of that is I love you. I'm just not saying it right now, and I don't even want to consider it because I'm just more focused on changing you so that I can feel more comfortable with you. I don't know if you follow, but if I just, drop the defense, drop the mask, drop the shield, and just recognize within myself, no matter how you're behaving here, I love you and I still love you. And that hurts to say it. That's going to be a far more truthful conversation right there. Do you understand? And then if that's received and accepted on the other side, they're both starting to drop into the dream bubble instead of all this other pettiness. But it takes resilience to do that, right? Because it feels risky to the identity, right? If I tell you I love you, then maybe you're going to take advantage of me. Whatever the thoughts are behind it. I can go on and on and on here, but let's move forward here. So when we're constructing a deception, meaning let's create a narrative that might feel true to me, or it's conveniently true to me, but it's not totally based on truth. I'm going to omit details, or I'll cherry pick facts and string them together, not include all the facts. I might exaggerate certain things or understate other things, okay? And watch how you recount your day to yourself. And ask yourself, when I tell this story to myself or to a friend, here's what happened today. Am I omitting details? Am I cherry picking certain facts so that it supports my argument? Am I exaggerating certain things or understating certain things? Then you can tell you're being dishonest with yourself. Then try to retell that story simply from a transparent and congruent fashion and just recount the facts and make a distinction between what's fact, feeling, and perception. Now, there's two things about deception. I'm going to construct a deception, and then I'm going to defend it. meaning I need to keep this version of the story alive, all right? Especially if you start to question or challenge it, I'm going to deflect, I'm going to deny, I'll attack, I can project. No, you're the one who's doing that, not me. I'm going to finger point. This is your doing, your fault. I'll distract by saying, oh, that's not important. This is more important. Look over here. Or I might even mirror by saying, oh, no, I'm not the one doing that. It's you. Okay. I might defame you, saying you don't know what you're talking about. I can discredit you. Nothing you say holds water. I could never trust you. Or I might even withhold. I'm not responding to that. I don't need to show you that. Okay, and then I can get into emotions here where I shame you, I threaten you with fear, or I guilt trip you with obligation, or I start virtue signaling, meaning I'm a higher minded person than you. How even dare you question who I am? I do so many good things. And, you know, do you guys get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
These are tactics. So if you're meeting this kind of behavior where somebody seems like they're coming from emotion, where it's producing shame, threat, guilt, or virtue, and what they're doing, they're deflecting, projecting, finger pointing, distracting, mirroring, denying, attacking, defaming, discrediting, or withholding, well, then something isn't right, okay? Because otherwise, they'd be transparent and they're willing to be challenged and questioned, and they'll just be direct, congruent, and forthright. I forgot to add that there. With truth, you're forthright and you're direct. And there is no shame or guilt or withholding or anything that goes along with it. It's just, it's upfront. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, a lot of sense.
So watch this. Watch this in conversations, and watch that in media, especially when you got people being interviewed. Okay? Or people trying to push a narrative onto you. Okay? Any questions here? This is also like, go read news articles and see if any of this stuff is going on. Okay. Then you need to question, okay, what's going on here? And then ask, who's writing the story and why? What's the programming they're trying to get across? Do you understand? What's the belief system they're trying to make me buy into? Because all of this is about selling a narrative, whether it's an argument, a conflict, a media show, or a media story, it doesn't matter. Everyone's selling you a narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Okay, so working with emotions. Emotions are going to do four things. They're going to bind things together like glue. They're going to drive action, propel things forward. They also will program. They're creating a programming of a mindset or a belief, and they're storing information. We can, when we're storing emotions in our body, and then when they get released, memories start coming back. Okay, so emotions are storing information, memories, experiences, etc. The things you remember the most are the things you were most emotional with while it was happening. If something doesn't matter to you, there's no emotional investment, you'll forget it quickly. Okay? So when we're working with emotions, knowing this, they bind, they drive, they program, or they store information. Then when emotions come up, we choose. If I engage with the emotion, I'm going to anchor something. Or if I'm engaging with the emotion, I'm going to release something. When I'm anchoring an emotion, I'm programming something. When I'm releasing an emotion, I'm deprogramming something. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So story plus emotion equals programming, all right? So this is what I'm calling an emotional narrative. It's not a dry, detached narrative of facts. This is a story with an emotional point of view. When somebody is telling you an emotional narrative, what they're doing is they're shifting responsibility And they may be doing a distortion of facts. And they're creating an illusion of power. And they're working through or preying upon a need for validation. What this all adds up to is it's manipulative. It is boring, I know, Amiel. So this is related to manipulation. When we're being manipulated, we're being told an emotional narrative. When we are manipulating ourselves, we are telling ourselves an emotional narrative. How are you guys doing with this information? Making sense?
A lot of sense.
Okay, so what makes it emotional? Well, if we're manipulating ourselves or another person, what we're really doing is we're trying to amplify their weakness, or we're trying to inflate their ego using control or validation, okay? So that means we're going to work with amplifying their fear, their sense of obligation, amplifying their guilt or their shame. This is around amplifying weakness. This is to make them feel weak so we can have control over them and reduce their sense of validation. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Or we might inflate their ego by making them feel like a hero, by colluding with whatever story or gossip is there so that they feel like they're privy, like this is, you know, secret information, and that increases their sense of importance. And then I can play with flattery. This is going to, flattery and feeling important is going to increase their sense of validation, making them be a hero, and like they're you know, colluding can mean they're getting the secret knowledge, the secret information, okay? Or it gives them a sense of more power. Does that make sense? That's also, these are forms of manipulation to either amplify weakness or inflate the ego. Fear and obligation can be like threats and obligation. That's gonna weaken their sense of control. Guilt and shame is gonna weaken their sense of validation. Heroism and collusion is gonna strengthen their sense of power. Importance and flattery is gonna strengthen their sense of validation. And what I'm doing as I do it is I'm creating a dependency.
Right.
Okay, that's how I'm manipulating them. Okay, now me as the manipulator, I can show up as a punisher or a self-punisher. Okay, I can show up as a sufferer, or I can show up as a tantalizer, a tempter, meaning I'm tempting you, I'm offering you temptation, I'm tantalizing you, I'm getting into your sense for desire. Okay. How are you guys doing with this? These are just basic ingredients of what makes a manipulation a manipulation. And when it's done emotionally, I mean, I'm getting you to have buy-in so you can depend on me. Believe my narrative and take that on as your own belief, okay? Or I'm trapping you into something, okay? Do you guys have any examples of what this might sound like in conversation?
I'm wondering, is it then bad to like try to empower someone, like say, you got this, you're good, blah, 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 stuff like that? Is that like flattery?
If it's coming from a fearful, empty place, or from need, meaning emptiness, then yeah, it's going to be manipulation. Even if I have the best interest, like, oh my God, like you're so powerful and courageous right now for doing that. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability with me. Your heart is so open. You've really opened my heart. But what I might be doing is flattering you, making you feel more important and like a hero. I'm just going to be inflating your ego. Now you're going to look to me to say, yeah, I get real validation and power from this person. And I'm going to come back for another session of coaching. Do you understand? So I'm really not giving you autonomy, even if my best intention is to build you up, because I do believe you're a good person. But if I'm not coming from a resilient place, If I'm not looking at you as a resilient person, I could resort to these tactics, and they can be feel-good tactics, but what I will be creating is a codependency. And this is where a lot of people don't notice what they're doing. Do you understand? So
when I'm like coming from a place of like, it doesn't really matter to me if they believe me if I say they are great, but I just feel good saying it, like, hey, you're great, I think you can do this, I believe in you.
yes,
like,
you can. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, hey, you know, that took a lot of courage or it took a lot to open and share that experience. How is it for you now? How are you feeling? As opposed to me starting to stack all of these virtues on you. Or make it about me and how you've fulfilled me and done some great thing and painting you as a hero. It's more like, just keep it to facts. You shared a story. It was tough. What did it take of you or demand of you to be able to do that? That's proof to yourself that you're resilient, because you were being transparent and you survived it. Does that make sense? That's different. It may not sound as glamorous, but what it's not doing is feeding a victimhood through heroism. Okay. So if we want to deprogram an emotional narrative going on, what we need to do is first separate the story from the emotion. All right. And we need to separate facts from perception and feeling. Okay. If emotion is coming up, then just focus on the emotion and release it without the story. Oh my God, my boss insulted me. I got so angry. I just wanted to punch him in the face. I'm so angry right now and it's not fair. That story with emotion. Okay, so what are you feeling now? I'm angry. Great. Now let's just focus on the anger. It's not about the boss. It's not about the situation. Just what's it like now to experience your anger? I really want to punch a pillow. Great, just punch it and feel the sensations of the energy you're using. It's not put a face on the pillow. Do you understand? Because then I'm mixing in a story. On the other side, some people need to clear out their story. Here's my horrible day. Well, clear it out without defense or argument. Do not defend yourself. Do not argue a point of view. Just the fact. I woke up, I stubbed my toe, I spilled my coffee. I got a phone call that said I need to go to the vet because my dog needs another operation, blah, 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 blah. Just the facts. Okay? And even better, it's said without all the emotion mixed in. It's more, put it up on a screen and tell it like it's a movie synopsis. Or write it out so that you're not emotionally engaged with it. Because what you don't want to do is clear the story while reinforcing the perceptions and the feelings and the programming. You just need to release the facts. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. When we can release the emotion and clear out the narrative, then we'll hit a clear space. And there's where we can anchor the resilience. Okay, and from the resilient place, now we can re-examine the story or the beliefs, whatever, but it's from resilience, because now we're not so entangled in that emotional narrative. And that's how we begin the deprogramming process. Next webinar, we'll look at, okay, now from that clear space, how do we reconstruct and reprogram? Okay, how are you guys doing with this information? Helpful. All right. Well, let's see how we're doing for time. Can you still stick around or?
Yeah.
Okay, because we've got a summary now here. I'll go through this quickly. You can stop me along the way. So regarding narratives, how do you work with the narrative? Well, listen and respond to actions, behavior, and energy, as opposed to responding and listening to the words, feelings, and perceptions. If you keep engaging with words, feelings, and perceptions, you are possibly reinforcing a programming yourself, meaning adopting their narrative as a belief. You might even be colluding with the deception. If you want to dig down into what's the truth of the moment, work with the actions, behaviors, and energy. Making sense? What makes you smile, Amiel?
I'm just thinking that I really like to be manipulative and to encourage people.
Yeah, well, remember what I said earlier. Whether a truth is a lie or a lie becomes truth, the truth will reset itself, the lie will fall apart. So you may be able to temporarily manipulate somebody, but it takes a lot of energy to hold that lie together. Do you understand? It will bite you in the end. Think of it like it boomerangs, like in karma, like, you get off your guard, off your game, and the whole thing can fall apart like a house of cards. Do you understand? So, and we do unconsciously manipulate ourselves and each other a lot because we're running away from the truth of our own source, autonomy, and resilience. If we spend that energy just connecting to source, truth, autonomy, resilience, there's less reason to manipulate because we're in a more unified state of being. Does that make sense? Manipulations are gameplay. Okay, so now here's what's interesting. Most narratives paint the hero as a victim who triumphs over adversity. This is basically our hero's journey. Now, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. There is a risk of self-deception and reinforcement of that victimhood if that narrative does not have a foundation of resilience. If it's more the us against the world, the hero against the circumstances, poor hero, and wow, the hero rises, and wow, what a hero. They're actually still acting like a victim. But if the hero is resilient and says, okay, I'm going to embrace all these obstacles and all these challenges and let them teach me something, that is far more resilient because they're in, again, that dream fluid state of, okay, let's expand what the truth is. And let me be a hero taking a journey that way. That everything is teaching me something, as opposed to I need to conquer. Does that make sense what I'm saying? This is why every person that gives you an emotional narrative, they're the hero of the story. They're also the victim of the story, and they're defending their argument. Okay, and they're convincing you that they are right and that you need to be on their side. And if you are, they're your friend, or you're their friend. Does that make sense? Binding a narrative to the identity only reinforces opposition and adversity, and that steers the person away from their resilience and autonomy. Why? Because they're more focused on keeping the identity intact and letting all of the story and circumstances define the identity. And then they never get in touch with their own resilience. Again, separate the story from the person, separate the story from the emotions and the perceptions. Does that make sense? Because if I'm gonna, again, like that diagram of game, if I'm reinforcing this person's story and that's what they identify, then it's only going to also aggravate the opposition all around them. And then it's going to make them feel more like a victim who must be a hero, who must triumph over adversity. It's getting us nowhere. Does that make sense? Okay. If we're trying to transform a person on the level of the narrative without a foundation of resilience, we're only reinforcing victimhood. Again, it's the same thing. That's going to create more resistance, more opposition, and false empowerment because we never got to source. We only got to that red line of story and game. So we need to go beyond the narrative. So how do we do that? We got to separate the person from the narrative and differentiate the story from the facts. 4 separate things, okay? So facts are created by doing. It's all through action and behavior, things that are done. Facts are not feelings nor perceptions. For somebody to say, here's the fact, Trump is a racist. That is a perception, not a fact. What are the actions the person did that has you see them as a racist. Does that make sense? It's not just, oh, but he feels like one. He talks like one. No, that's feeling and perception. Do you get it? Okay. Now, feelings will influence perception. And do not let perception become a fact. This can be a vicious, vicious circle. That if we're told to focus more on how does it feel and how are we perceiving it, or how are we told to feel and told to perceive something as if it's a fact, we stop looking at what the people are doing. Do you understand? That's called magic. I want you to focus on how this feels and how you see this, and don't ignore what I'm actually doing, or what, right? That's the fact. The fact is the action and the doing. I can't stress that enough. This is why, again, we focus on actions, behaviors, and energies, as opposed to words and stories and narratives and feelings and perceptions. So, consensus, meaning, is not truth. Just because everyone else agrees and believes it doesn't make it true. Consensus is agreement, has nothing to do with truth, okay? So be willing to question and challenge a consensus of beliefs and narratives. That includes perceptions. Really, Trump is a racist. Let me question that. Let me look through the feelings and perceptions and boil it down to facts, actions. And then let me see what's true here. But not a lot of people are doing that. They're just reading it and swallowing it. And because everyone else is saying it or thinking it, they just say, well, it must be true. All they're doing is agreeing to a point of view and buying that hook, line, and sinker as a belief, and then calling it a truth. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense.
Okay. And if it's true, then it's true, but show me the action. Show me the facts. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. So then how do we get to a baseline of autonomous truth? Well, number one, work with transparency, congruency, and resilience. That always leads to truth. It's not words, consensus, or belief. Words, consensus, or belief are points of view. Okay? Neutralize fear, need, and emptiness by reinforcing basic vitality. What is the life force within me? What is my ability to live and breathe and withstand and survive? What's that basic vital energy? That's what's going to lead me to resilience and away from fear and emptiness. Making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Focus on your own innate resilience before you go out there seeking validation or control. Before you seek approval, before you ask people, am I right? Go and focus on your innate resilience. Before you start saying, I gotta be secure, or I have to be stable, or seek your resilience. This is what's going to influence your choices of action and your choices of beliefs and your choice of narrative. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How do you protect yourself from manipulation? Reconcile your own relationship to fear, shame, guilt, and need while you are connected to resilience. If you neutralize your personal fears, your sense of shame or guilt, need, desperation, emptiness, you already become immune to those fear tactics that we mentioned before, right? I can blackmail you if I make you feel fearful and ashamed and hold this over a head and say, I'll expose this. Therefore, if you don't want it to be exposed, you'll do as I say. And if you're overcome with fear, shame, and guilt, you're going to do what I say. Do you understand? If you're resilient and say, well, I'm willing to face the consequences of whatever it is from a resilient place, I still might be fearful, but I'm not run by it, then I cannot have power over you. You want to expose it? Go ahead. I'll deal with it. Suddenly I have no leverage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. enjoyment of your own pure vital energy is a clear path to your well-being. And that will lead you to your inner source. So even if you're angry, just focus on the anger, not the narrative that goes around the anger. And feel, what is the sensation of anger? What is the vitality in this anger? It soon will not be called anger. It will transmute into something else, and it will become vitality. And then just enjoy what that vitality gives you, and enjoy the well-being that it provides you, and that what it nourishes in you, and you'll already start to enter your inner source, which feels permanent and timeless. We've got other webinars on how to do that. So with that, enjoy questioning your own beliefs and narratives, and enjoy feeling destabilized. You may question your like, I've lived with this belief or narrative for all my life. Life's been hard. I always have to fight for my opinion. I always have to fight for everything. Well, what if that's not true? Oh my God, well then who would I be? That's the destabilization. If you're feeling that destabilization, actually take a moment to enjoy it, because you know you're cracking the mirror. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Focus then again on your resilience. Engage with your higher mind, that sense of infinite awareness, permanent self, timelessness, all potential, and then go explore further with fascination, continuing to question and challenge what you used to hold as a firm belief. And in the end, you can decide, do I take it or leave it? As opposed to, but I must take it because I couldn't stand the alternative. Do you understand? I would die if I let go of this belief. Then there's something false going on there, something not resilient going on there. How is this for you guys? Making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, stay grounded in truth and transparency. Be discerning what you choose to take on, either as someone's narrative or a belief or a truth that you read or hear about. Before you take it on, distill everything down to simple facts, actions. Go research it. Okay, clean it up. Question everything with love, wonder, and humor, and you'll be fine. And then be congruent. How are you guys doing? What are you taking away?
There are lots of things to take away.
Yeah. As always, this is very condensed.
Yeah, I really, how shall I say, it was so straightforward the way you cleared how deception look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to face it in my prior job with one of the owners of the company, and it was textbook what you put there. Yes.
All right.
Word for word, yeah.
I think the point, though, I do want to get across is I want you to be able to learn how to detect deception, but I don't want you to think you now have to oppose deception and prove them wrong or prove the truth, because what you're doing, you're putting yourself into a game of opposition.
Absolutely.
Do you understand?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Rather decide, okay, if there's a deception going on here, I can question it, I can challenge it. Yeah. But I don't have to teach them a lesson. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And then I got to come back into myself and say, well, okay, so that's what they're trying to put on me. That's what they're trying to do to me. Again, focus back on my resilience. If I'm coming from a resilient place, then I can make a choice. Do I fight? Do I expose? Or do I just walk away? Or do I just accept that, yeah, there's a deception happening, but it doesn't have to be my truth too? Does that make sense?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am not saying go out, detect deception, and then be a warrior and expose and oppose. Do you understand? Because you're just reinforcing more of the deception, ironically and paradoxically.
I do. I am very much okay and aware with everything you said. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And I'm doing that also just for the recording to make sure that I'm not giving a distorted message or that the message gets distorted. All right. The point of all of EED is to bring people more and more into that level of truth, congruency, transparency, resilience, calm, generosity, okay, and longevity. And so they can be functioning creatively with peace of mind and well-being and full autonomy. And then that moves us from surviving to thriving. And we don't need to wait for the world to become perfect, and we don't need to wait for greed to be eliminated. We can just make up our own mind and then reconstruct the narrative we're choosing to live in, which will create the reality we choose. Does that make sense? And again, that's going to point to the next webinar on how do you actually do that. But this is first, clear out the BS. First step, clear it out. Release the programming so you can examine what's the programming you want, because everything is programming. We're not going to escape it. As long as we have an identity, we're programmable. And why do we have an identity? To create and function. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Okay. What else do you take away?
I like the webinar's take on deprogramming and programming, on untangling emotion from the facts. It was the most convincing point. Like, okay, live out emotions on the one hand, and then talk about the story on the other hand in a calm and cool fashion to get a more clear point of view on what are the actually facts, and then start reconstruct the programming based on the facts from resilience, having the client or the other person connected to source.
Yeah.
To see what is the most truest shape this identity wants to take and can take, and we're supporting it to get there.
In fact, what I may recommend is get the emotion released. Whatever emotion's coming up, release it. We have techniques and ways to do that. We can release it, peel it, whatever, ventilate it. Again, separate from the story, just the pure energy. Then there will be a clear space that comes, a sigh of relief or a pause or a moment. There's where you can already start to anchor resilience. And then from the resilient place, just get the story, whatever story details need to be cleared out, right? So that may be an order to do things. It's not hard and fast, but it's recommended, right? Because if you try to clear out story details first, it's going to be really hard to separate it from emotion. But if you can vent emotions first, that will get them in that cool, calm, collected, detached, resilient place to be able to just put the facts on the table. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then the facts on the table help to drop into the dream.
Yeah, because then they're in a place where they can accept the facts as opposed to prove, fight, argue, whatever the facts, okay? Anything else that you're left with or that you take away? And thanks, by the way, for staying the extra time. We're over time. So, so for those listening to the recording and those that are here, so our next webinar is Liberating the Resilient Self. It's a part 2, and this is more about, okay, how do you reconstruct the narrative? How do you reprogram, all right, from a resilient place, all right? And then we have our courses coming up this spring in Europe. We have Module 1, Revealing Essence. This gives you the foundation, all these basic techniques, especially on how do you drop from story to game to dream to source and then back up? How do you only listen and respond to behaviors, action, and energy? How do you discipline yourself not to engage so much with words, feelings, and perceptions? It gives you that foundation to work more fluidly with that. It's simple but not easy, okay? It takes practice and discipline. So coming up in March and April, we have modules in Frankfurt, Paris, and Munich, and then in June in Berlin. And you guys here that are alumni already, feel free to come and assist, all right? Mm-hmm. And then we have our advanced courses, Reconciling Conflict and Group Facilitation, coming up in June and November in Munich and Frankfurt. So That's what we have coming up. So go to our Eventbrite registration site, EED-EU-2020.eventbrite.com. And for more webinars, EED-webinars-2020.eventbrite.com. Visit our website, essence-dynamics.com. Visit us or follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EEDynamics, or email me, troy@essence-dynamics.com. So, thank you all, everyone. And I do that for the benefit of those listening to the recording, because I know you guys all know this contact information. And it's great to have you keep coming to the webinars, and all of you sign up for live webinars so you can participate and keep coming back again and again. Thank you very much, everyone. Have fun now.
Thank you, Troy.
Listening to narratives in a different way, and go out and play with that, and challenge your own beliefs and narratives, and see what happens. And again, pay attention to your pure and vital energy so that you keep coming back to a central place of resilience, which is source. So thank you all, and I wish you all the best. And until next time, our next webinar is February 12th, Liberating the Resilient Self.